Today we're going to talk about the assessment of NSSI in children and adolescents. Before we actually talk about the different assessment measures, I'd like to address some limitations. In terms of the actual assessment measures, I can only find a limited amount that were normed for children and adolescent populations. It was extremely difficult to find out what the age range for a lot of these assessments were, and whether they were actually normed for a younger population. In terms of norming, the earliest I could find was age 11. So in terms of trying to find a reliable assessment for NSSI in children under that age, there doesn't seem to be one. There's also some differences between assessment measures as to what constitutes NSSI. There's two different definitions that can be used, which include the direct and deliberate bodily harm in the absence of suicidal intent versus self-injury with and without suicidal intent as different versions of the same behavior. This can affect the validity and reliability of these assessment measures, because if they're measuring different operational definitions as to what NSSI is, it will be a lot more difficult to understand what is actually this bodily harm. Is it in the absence of suicidal intent, or is it both? The majority of the ones I picked do use the first definition, but I do have one that doesn't differentiate between the two, and I'll address that later. And then finally, there's limited research reporting clinical trials on these assessment measures. Some of them were only evaluated once, as far as I could tell. And then if they were normed, they were normed on adult populations, and if they were normed for adolescents, it was sometimes in an inpatient treatment program. I couldn't find a lot of data of these assessments being used outside of a clinical setting or a research setting, so that can definitely affect the generalizability of these assessment measures too. So in terms of the assessment instruments I'll be going into, we'll have omnibus measures such as the SIPI, the SHBQ, and the ABASI. Functional measures such as the FASM, the ISAS, and the SIMS, as well as behavioral measures such as the DSHI and the SHI. So in terms of omnibus measures, these assess a variety of NSSI domains, and the most comprehensive of the assessment measures I'm going to cover. Although these are very comprehensive, they are not very specific, and they do not focus entirely on NSSI. These will also look into suicidal behavior and suicidal ideation, unlike the later assessments I'm going to talk about, which focus solely on NSSI. So, knowing that, we're going to go over the ones that I found, which include the SIPI, which is a 169 item structured interview. There's a short form that has 72 items if there's a limited time period. The SIPI assesses the topography, frequency, and presence of suicide plans, ideation, gestures, and attempts, as well as thoughts of NSSI and instances of NSSI. It also evaluates methods, age of onset, frequency, function, severity, precipitants, concurrent consumptions of drug and alcohol, medical treatment, social influences, impulsivity, and estimated likelihood of future occurrences of NSSI. So like I said, it covers a wide array of SSI and NSSI behaviors. I actually have a copy of this that we can look at. It's available for free online. So this is what the SIPI looks like. This is the long form. So each section goes into a different facet of SSI or NSSI, such as suicidal ideation, where they ask a basic question, and then they go into more detail with each section as you go on. So what's also interesting is that they will define what they are asking in each section. So they'll ask a qualifying question as to whether they engage in this. And then if they do, they tell you what they will refer to it as. And then they go down and ask questions and go into more specificity as to what each thing is. So as you can see, it covers a lot of SSI behaviors and thoughts. And in terms of NSSI, there aren't that many sections on this. So from what they do have, we give you the definition. So thoughts of purposely hurting yourself without wanting to die. And then they give you an example of some NSSI behaviors. And then they go down as similar sections and give more detail. And then further on in the next section, they ask whether you have engaged in it beyond just ideation. And then that is just your rating scale, which goes from 0 to 4. And that's it for the SITB. So it covers a majority of things, but not exactly what we are looking for. And then next, we have, so let me get back into presentation mode. So next we have the self-harm behavior questionnaire. And this is a 32-item self-report questionnaire. And this assesses suicidal behaviors, ideation attempts, gestures, as well as risk-taking behaviors in NSSI. So again, a lot of SSI questions, but including NSSI at the end. This also assesses method, frequency, age of onset, most recent occurrence, lethality, and medical outcome of self-injury. I'm not sure if I have a copy of this, but let me see. Okay, so next we have the ABASI. So this one is not available for free online, so you have to have a copyrighted version of it in order to use it. So I don't have an example to show you. But in terms of the ABASI, I do have an example that I can show you. So this assesses the clinical severity of NSSI in individuals that have already been identified as engaging in NSSI behavior. This assessment is really interesting because it was developed as a self-report clinical assessment in the anticipation of NSSI disorder being included in the DSM-5. And these items are included to assess criterions A through D of NSSID. This is not currently in the DSM, but it is being used in hopes that it will be included in future versions of the DSM. So each section, there are several sections, and they will cover A through D. For A, they ask respondents to record the number of days in the past year they engaged in each of 21 specific NSSI behaviors. Criterion B includes 3 items: using the lead when I self-injure, I expect that I will. Criterion C includes 4 items: using the lead in the past year, how often did you? And criterion D, the phrase to hurt yourself and or cause pain is added to descriptions of NSSI behaviors in criterion A to determine whether they were engaging in the behavior for self-injury or an accident or without suicidal intent. So this is used so that you can really differentiate between the two. So I do have an example of this. So this is what the form looks like. And as you can see, they do tell you at the beginning that it is without the intent of suicide. And they also include the, asterisk about accidents or was it done with the goal of killing yourself. And then it goes through and it lists 21 specific types of NSSI. So this is leading into our more specific forms of assessment. So this omnibus measure is best in terms of actually determining what NSSI behaviors your client is engaging in, how many times they've done it, within the past year and how many times a day they did it, as well as the age. And it's relatively short. So this is what it looks like. And then we will go on to our next assessment, which is functional measures. So these were developed specifically to assess functions of or motivations for NSSI. So the first one I included is the FASM. This is a self-report measure that assesses the method, frequency, age of onset, and history of NSSI. This also focuses on functions of self-injury. So it goes into the why of NSSI. So this captures 22 possible reasons for SSI, as well as free response space for unlisted reasons. Oh, sorry, that should say NSSI. And then the reasons can be understood based on a 4-function model that was created for this assessment, which include automatic negative reinforcement, such as coping mechanisms for negative emotion, and automatic positive reinforcement, such as self-punishment, as well as social negative reinforcement to avoid hurting someone else, for instance, and social positive reinforcements, such as communicating with others for help or attention. And I think I have a copy of this so we can look at. We do. So this is what the FASM looks like. It's a lot shorter than the other assessments. Again, here's our operational definition without trying to kill yourself. And then these are the 22 specific NSSI behaviors that were chosen for this assessment. Asks if you've done it, how many times you've done it, and whether you got medical treatment. And then asks you whether you've done any of these acts. And then if they were, then they go down and ask further questions. So this is available for free online. And then, so we also have a copy of the ISAS, which is a self-report measure, and it's based on a comprehensive literature review of NSSI functions. And that's when they did a very large literature review looking at past research as to what constitutes that. So this measures 13 functions of NSSI as well as a lifetime frequency of 12 NSSI behaviors. Each function is assessed by 3 items. When I harm myself, I am. Participants also will rate how well items complete the phrase, such as calming myself down. When I harm myself, I am seeking care or help from others. And this is what the ISAS looks like. And so again, this has our operational definition, and then it has to estimate the number of times that they have actually had NSSI, and has a list of the NSSI behaviors. And then next they are asked to go into more detail as to whether they, if they have engaged in this behavior, how many times they have done it, when it was on, when it happened, if you experience pain. So it does go into a lot of detail. And then further on, it goes into what could be the reason behind NSSI. So we have that as well. And then it has some blank space if you want to add anything that wasn't listed. And then these are the items for each of the 3 functions. So here are our 13 functional scales. And it has what each one does. So again, this is available for free online that can be used at any point. And then let's go back. Next, we have the SIMS, and this is a 35-item self-report questionnaire which assesses the motivations for NSSI within 6 different factors, which include modulating affect, inflicting self-punishment, influencing others, self-stimulation, and desolation and magical control, which are author-created factors and are less interpretable because they are not easy to define. So in terms of what they define them as, desolation includes managing how one responds to feelings of isolation and emptiness, and magical control includes attempting to control, protect, or hurt others through NSSI behaviors. I don't have a copy of this for us to view because it is copyright protected. So unfortunately, I don't have an example for you. And then finally, we have our behavioral measures. So these assess a history of various NSSI behaviors with less attention to detail. So these are most useful for determining which and how often NSSI behaviors have been performed. And it's a quick questionnaire just to see what it looks like. So the two that I've chosen are the deliberate self-harm inventory, or the DSHI, which is a 17-item self-report measure. It's designed to capture NSSI exclusively, and it assesses 16 specific NSSI behaviors and 1 other category specified by respondent for history, age of onset, frequency, and severity. And then finally, we have the SHI, which is a 22-item yes or no self-report questionnaire, and this assesses history, frequency, and method of commonly occurring self-injurious behaviors. It also includes 1 open response for any forms of self-injury not captured by the 22 items assessed. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, this is the assessment that does not differentiate whether there is an intent to die, and it's difficult to distinguish suicide-related self-injury from NSSI. So I do have a copy of this. And this is what it looks like. And as you can see in the instructions, this is check yes only for those items that you have done intentionally or on purpose to hurt yourself. It does not differentiate between suicidal and NSSI behaviors. So if you do, here we have the yes or no, and then if it is yes, the number of times. And then it has other questions as well. And then of course, here's our open-ended question. So in terms of assessments, that's all I could find. Hopefully, these assessment measures would be helpful for you if you are working with children and adolescents. But do remember that the majority of these were normed for older populations. So until there's more data and information as to whether these can be used with younger populations, they should be used with caution. Okay, well, thank you for watching my presentation. I appreciate it.